What is up, everyone? Welcome to week 10 and episode 10 of the Fantasy Cheat Sheet Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Christensen. You can find me at JAYC_DFF. And joining me tonight is one of my co-hosts, Evan Ritter. You can find him at EV_RITT3. Check him out there on Twitter. What's going on tonight, Evan?
How's it going, guys? Doing great, man. Ready to be here. Glad we got a new guest here and your brother. Happy he could fill in for Mike. Yeah. So ready to get week 10 started, man. Had a crazy game last week, obviously, or last night. Obviously we'll get into that here in a sec. But yeah, ready to go ahead and get things started, guys.
Yeah, and as you said there, Mike couldn't make it tonight, and had to find a guest, and I asked like 20 people, and they all said no, so we had to promote Josh from the chat to the show tonight. So Josh Christensen, you could find him at DFFJChris. What's up, Josh? Welcome to the show.
Listen, Jay, I was just happy to be considered. I'm going to do the two-hand wave to everyone at home right now. Hey, everyone. Hey, everyone that I'm usually in the chat with. Thanks for having me on, guys. Happy to fill in for Mike. And it'll be nice to have. I'm sure it'll be nice to have Mike back next week. So
bring back Mike from Andrew. Yeah, Andrew said no, so we had to take Josh. We had to take the other brother. So
went in order of age, so that's good.
Yeah, no, that's how it goes. And as always, you can. We're a member of the Going for Two Live podcast network, so I want to throw that out there. Check out all the podcasts at Going for Two Live on their Twitter page, or head over to their YouTube page. Check out all the shows there, and that's where you're finding us right now, Going for Two Live. And this show, if you haven't caught us before, we're gonna count down essentially 10 topics, 10 things that you need to know heading into this week's games, heading into week 10 this week. And if you caught the show before, welcome back, and hit us up with any questions that you want in the chat. We try to get through our countdown of 10 things, but if you get a question, it's start, sit, trade question, whatever you feel like, hit us up in the chat. We try to get to as many questions as we can. And, we will try to give you a response if you hit us up there. So hit us up in the chat. Anyways, we are going to get right into it with a quick recap of last night's game. And as Evan mentioned there, what a game. I mean, honestly, one of the best games of the season, probably one of the best games I've ever seen, to be honest. I mean, it's just front to back.
A lot of offense, very few punts. That was
good. I mean, really. I mean, I just can't believe how many points they put up in that game. But I think everybody on Twitter during that game was just this game sucks. That was basically the main thing going on Twitter. Baltimore Ravens fall to the Miami Dolphins, obviously. 22-10, really a continuation of week 9. We saw lots of upsets last week. It was a really, really weird week, and that really did not stop last night as we saw another top team fall to a team at the bottom of the standings and honestly just not play well from an offensive perspective pretty much the entire game. We did not see a lot of fantasy output in this game whatsoever. Some guys kind of salvaged a good night in the end, but honestly, on the whole, there was not a lot for teams that had guys going in this game. So, quick takeaways from this game. We'll pass it around here. We'll start with you, Evan. Are there any takeaways from this game? What can we say about this game last night?
Oh, man. Well, first off, once again, a freaking underdog comes away with a win. I mean, it's just crazy at the rate these underdogs are hitting this week. I thought we got all the lopsided matchups with the underdogs coming away victorious. I got all that out of our systems last week with multiple teams, top teams falling. But it looks like we could be in for another week of unpredictability, I guess. I don't know. Just crazy. The Ravens, before the loss last night, were actually on a 51-game streak where they had scored 14 or more points. That was the second longest streak in the NFL behind the 2009 to 2013 New England Patriots, who had a 63-game run. But, I mean, it's just mind-blowing. I don't understand it. I think the craziest thing to me last night was just how well this Miami defense played. I mean, they carried 2 hurt quarterbacks. They stopped one of the most prolific, if not the most prolific playmaker in the business in Lamar Jackson. But honestly, we've seen this from the Ravens a couple times this season where they just come out flat and completely off their game. When prior to, they look like they could be a top 3 offense in the league. Just off the top of my head,
against both Indy and Minnesota the past 2 weeks, the first
Yeah.
half, their offense has been anemic, and then they obviously put together great comebacks where their offense looked amazing in the second half, and it just never came this week. I'm sure like I wasn't the only one who was thinking, oh, they're going to turn it on eventually. This is going to, and all of a sudden I
Exactly.
look up and it's midway through the fourth quarter and they're still not moving the ball.
Yeah, I mean they looked flat against the Lions in a game they should have lost. They played terrible against the Bengals team, who just got ran over by the Jets and the Browns. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm sold on this Ravens team being a consistent enough threat. I think they obviously still have a lot of work to do, because it seems like when their game plan kind of gets blown up, they have a hard time adjusting. And I just don't usually, would expect that from a John Harbaugh offense. But one thing I'm definitely not doing is taking this Miami defense seriously. But I don't know. I said the same thing about the Titans, and now they're playing lights out. So what do I know?
They might be the best team. Yeah, Miami's got 3 in a row. Bills they shut down pretty well. That was a really struggle for Bills to score in that game. And then Houston, which not saying a whole lot, but did what they needed to do versus the Texans offense. And then they come out and, really frustrated. Just no time for Lamar. Lots of guys in the backfield running blitzes there, effective blitzes, blowing that up. And then, like you said, really unimaginative play calling for pretty much the entire game to the end. Just those dumb screens to Marquise Brown every other play. Like, I didn't get that. But Josh, what did you you said before in pregame that you wished you just stayed on the UNC Pitt college game, and that might have been a good play.
that they at least scored some points in that game. The battle of Pickett and Howell, the two of the quarterbacks we're going to have to debate between this offseason for Dynasty players. Yeah, I came away from this game thinking to myself, almost a little bit more impressed by what Lamar Jackson has been able to do to this point, because Greg Roman is not helping him. Like, when things went wrong, where they were bringing 0 blitzes, they were bringing safeties, they were bringing corners, they were bringing fast athletic guys into the backfield, and they didn't move the pocket. They weren't running like hot routes or anything to counteract that coming into the second half. They were just like, Lamar, do Lamar things and get this done. But that's not going to work every week. Like, at some point, like, the coaching staff has to make it easier for Lamar, because it hasn't been easy for Lamar this season, and he's made it work to this point. But yeah, so that was frustrating to see, but almost like leaves you more impressed by what Lamar has done to this point, particularly as a fantasy player.
Yeah, for sure. And he salvaged, what did he get, 15, 16 points in fantasy?
Yeah.
So, even on his, probably this could be one of the worst games he has this year, and he still salvages a decent game. Rashad Bateman came alive at the end, had a decent day. If you're looking at Ravens pass catchers, Mark Andrews gets the touchdown. So if you have Mark Andrews on your team, he salvaged a decent day there. The interesting guy from the Miami side of the ball really was Tua. Very weird, to be honest. Like, he looked pretty decent for the most part when he came in, but he was being held back, I guess, for a team that's not contending. I guess you're trying to protect him, I guess, yet he's still dressed and he still ultimately had to play with whatever hand injury he has left. So that was interesting, but he did look pretty good in the game to me. A lot better for that offense than Brissett. I mean, he almost doubled in terms of average, completed passes in that game from what Brissett was doing. Brissett was just kind of gutting through, but I didn't think Tua looked that bad. It's just, for a team that's managed him so weird, color me a little bit interested in like what's going on there, just because of how they've handled him to this point. Deshaun Watson rumors. It's like, was this weird, or am I just reading into it too much? Just him not starting and then having to come in late. It's just bizarre.
No, it was weird. It was really weird, because like normally you'd think they picked a quarterback 5th overall in the draft last year. He's a sophomore player, and they're honestly, they're treating him like some journeyman starter that they picked up. You know what I mean? Like an expendable asset. Usually these players are really handled with a lot more care. And the fact that the 5th overall pick from last year's draft is they're willing to put him in with an injury. Like they're not willing to start him.
Yeah, I just feel like
of
you
that
start
injury,
him or you don't.
but they are
dress him.
willing to put them in there in emergency. Seems like a poor asset management. It seems like they should honestly, it feels like they've I've really been upset with how they've handled the Tua situation all along. I don't think that they've put him in a situation to succeed. And that's compounded by the fact that Tua's had his struggles overall. So another weird move in the saga that's been Tua Tagovailoa.
Any thoughts there, Evan, before we get to our cheats this week, or just Tua? It's just weird.
It's exactly to your guys' point. I don't understand. If he wasn't good enough to start, he shouldn't have been able to been thrown in an emergency situation and just risk him like that. It's not like the Dolphins are going anywhere this year. They did not absolutely have to come away with this win. So why, put Tua in harm's way? But who knows what they were thinking with that whole situation.
One of those things where over the last 2 years, just a guy you don't see many top quarterbacks handled, like last year being subbed for Ryan Fitzpatrick multiple times. And now this year, if you're hurt, even guys always want to gut through. Like Russell Wilson's going to come back early with a broken finger and probably play this weekend.
Mr.
You see guys who are, yeah, he is Mr. Unlimited. But you see these guys when they dress, it's like, no, that guy's playing. Like even if they're not 100%, they're playing because they're the guy and they want to lead the team.
Yeah.
So it is just weird that if he's dressed and active and to be the emergency quarterback, just weird. I just don't see that happening very often with guys that are the franchise quarterback for a team. So
particularly not with the team that has 2 wins into this point. Like
exactly.
At least last year you could be like, oh well, they're competing.
Yeah, they needed to win that game because they wanted to make the playoffs, but it's still
they put Ryan Fitzpatrick in. That's not the case this year. They're bad.
Yeah, so just strange. So anyways, we'll move on from that game and we'll never speak of that game ever again. And let's get right into our top 10 this week. These are our 10 topics that we want to get through, 10 things that you need to know heading into this Sunday's games, week 10. Let's kick things off with you, Evan. What is the first topic of the week?
So this week, I'm going to kind of focus all my cheats of the week per se towards just kind of some of my buy low, sell high targets for redraft this season. Just because we know that we're getting deeper into the season, fantasy trade deadlines are going to start, getting near. So I'm going to start with Brandon Cooks. He's going to be my first buy low candidate. I'm buying Brandon Cooks. It's not, the sexiest buy low candidate by any means, but he's, definitely a buy low candidate for me. He's on a bad team, so his stock is already lower than most. But then you add in the fact he hasn't had a 100-yard game since week 3. And that just makes him a perfect buy low candidate for me. Cooks ranks top because despite all that, Cooks ranks top 5 in the NFL in targets, percentage of team targets, and air yards. He gets Tyrod back, who, he didn't look the greatest in his first game back, but I think he'll, as he'll kind of get back to form, we should definitely see him get back to form and begin to, continue to hyper target his best player on the offense. Because he doesn't have anyone else to go to. Cooks is the guy in that offense. And not to mention the Texans actually, they have a nice set of defensive matchups coming up, which include the Jets, the Jaguars, the Colts, Seahawks, and the Titans. Houston is on a bye this week, so I think it's kind of a perfect opportunity to buy Cooks low, offer his owner, a player who necessarily isn't on bye, could help him out this week in week 10. And, I think you could definitely get Cooks for something, a lot. He's a perfect buy low candidate. I think you could get him, for cheap, honestly, right now, especially with him on bye. And then quickly, another wideout I'm looking to buy is Jerry Jeudy. So Yeah. What are your guys' thoughts on buying Brandon Cooks before the fantasy trade deadline?
I don't think it's a bad idea. It's just that offense is the one worry. But in terms of where he's probably perceived at this point, I think he has to be low. I think in Dynasty, I might not. I'd probably look elsewhere.
Yeah.
But for redraft, I could definitely see it because I think that's kind of the window that I like better. Just because he's a little bit older for quarterback, so I'd probably look elsewhere if I was buying in Dynasty. But I'm probably okay with that. Buying him low in a redraft format. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I want to get Josh's take, and then I want to ask you what you guys think because I'm thinking about making this trade, but I have a couple guys in mind. So I want to get Josh's take first, though.
Yeah, I like. He's one of those guys who I think you truly can buy low because I think there's just anything psychological with good players on bad teams. You're just not watching a lot of Brandon Cooks. Like I know like Brandon Cooks is one of the guys I've probably seen the least amount of tape on so far.
Red Zone doesn't play the Texans. They just don't. No. It's a rule. It's actually a rule.
No, they're on punt zone. That's where it is. Yeah. So I do like that from a chance of like I basically have this running theory that true buy lows are rare, but it's in certain situations where you're either buying a player who's injured at the time and can absorb that hit, or players that are just so off the radar but are still producing. Like I think Hunter Renfrow is actually a buy low just because he looks like an accountant but is still producing. And I think Brandon Cooks is kind of in that. I think there's just kind of a little bit of a stink around Brandon Cooks, who's always been productive to an extent. And wide receiver is deep, but he kind of fits the bill as a wide receiver 3 who can really solidify the bottom half here of your lineup.
Yeah, I'm thinking about moving him for moving to get him. I'm going to move Courtland Sutton or Devontae Smith.
Ooh.
And remember, this is redraft.
Josh loves Devontae.
So. I know, but that's what I said. Remember, this is redraft.
I know it's so hard, especially coming off of this week. I think it.
I would think more about Sutton, actually.
Sutton, yeah.
I would think more about Sutton too, because I think you could get more than Cooks for Smith right now, especially after this past week and the allure of the number 10 overall pick sort of player. But yeah, Sutton I'd be more into because he just has not been.
With
Judy there, it's kind of
and Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick's been good. Like he's a good, solid wide receiver who's more.
I know Tim Patrick got hurt a little bit last week. I just don't know the extent of it, but I'd have to look into that to see if that was if he was missing the game. Didn't really pay attention to Tim Patrick too much this week, but really it's Judy. It's been when Judy's in, that target share for Sutton suffers. So I think that's the guy to kind of look at. But in both cases, from a how the perceived value, you actually might get a little plus actually on either, because to your point, just that team, the Texans, it's just like, I think you could definitely probably buy low and maybe get a little bit more, which would be pretty good, I think. And if you got a good schedule bonus down the stretch and he already had his bye, those are advantages as well.
And he gets Tyrod back, I think,
Yeah. Tyrod
better than Davis Mills.
Yes.
Tyrod's also, if there's one thing Tyrod's done well through his career, it's chuck it down the field. Like he's had some success throwing deep down the field, if not other places. So yeah, I do like Tyrod for the rest of the season for Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, definitely an upgrade there. Let's start with you, Josh. This is a similar topic, I think, here, but take it away with our second topic of the week and your first ever topic on the show before. So
yeah, my first ever cheat of the week. Hopefully I won't. I'm actually going to redcon my own take here in a second. But it's part of it overall. And sticking with the buy theme, I'm saying buy Miles Sanders in all formats right now. And it is a risky move because before he got injured, Miles Sanders was thoroughly disappointing. He was averaging less than 12 touches a game, although still effective, running for just shy of 5 yards per carry. And overall, just not getting the volume really that we had wanted. Only 3 touchdowns in 7 games. But over the past 2 weeks, granted with him out of the lineup, the Eagles have totaled 66 running back carries, 6 running back touchdowns in that span right now. They have turned to running the ball, particularly with Jordan Howard, Boston Scott, a little bit of Kenny Gainwell there as well. There may have been some game script involved with that. The Detroit game got out of hand quickly, and the Chargers' run defense is bad. But the offense for the Philadelphia Eagles looked better when they were setting up the pass with the run, not the other way around. And I would hope that they would continue that trend and Miles Sanders to be the beneficiary when he gets back in the lineup. So obviously there's some risks there, but because of that, I do think there is a buy low opportunity for him. And even if he can get back to the point of touches where he was going back to last season in his 4 games with Jalen Hurts, which was around 16 touches a game, he can be a valuable RB2 for the rest of the season. Going down the stretch, particularly if this offense gels the way it has the last 2 weeks. Miles Sanders will be a nice part of that offense. And as we all know, running backs are slim pickings these days. So just a guy getting 15 plus touches in a relatively effective offense is easily going to put him into the RB2 category. It's not a lot of those guys right now.
No, for sure. And that's the turnaround that was needed. I think when on our podcast, we talked about Miles Sanders as this kind of a sneaky buy right before he got hurt. So
yeah,
we jinxed him, but at the same time, it was correct because look at what that running, it was like, this team has to run. I think it was that horrible game they had where Hurts was getting sacked all over the place. Who were they playing that
night? Was it the
I
San Francisco game? It was
one of those games where it was. I think we talked about it. I think it was the Thursday night game, and then we talked about it on this show. Just like that offense is a debacle, but it made sense that like they need to run the ball more because Hurts can't do everything. He was running the ball. He's trying to pass it. The passing with him when he's off, like it's inconsistent, and they needed to have a more balanced attack just to kind of take things off of his shoulders.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden Miles Sanders gets hurt, and then they decide to start doing it. All of a sudden you've got 3 backs involved to varying degrees the last 2 weeks. Honestly, the most consistent's been Jordan Howard, who wasn't even on the team a few weeks ago, which makes sense. Obviously running back, that's just how it goes. And, Adrian Peterson scoring touchdowns and Jordan Howard's, leading the way on the Eagles. That's just, I don't get it. But Miles Sanders comes back. He's the most talented back on that team. And I would imagine that he gets involved in some type of, I don't know if he's going to get workhorse numbers, but he's going to get the higher share, I would imagine, out of the backs on that team, on a team that can at times run the ball well. So I do think he's still a buy low, and he might even be lower now. We just saw Josh, you just traded for him for a 2nd round pick in the league, which was absurdly low.
In a dynasty league for what's
he's like 25 years old too. So he's still young,
he's very young, and it's not for a lack of talent. Now, is he Christian McCaffrey? Is he Derrick Henry? No, but is he a good? And is he a above average running back in this starting running back in this league? Yeah, like he should be. Now, of course, as I mentioned, there is risk for this. So at the right price, buy Miles Sanders, because they could be rolling with a running back by committee for the rest of the year as well. But given the talent of Miles Sanders, given the effectiveness of the running game the last 2 weeks, scheme wise, and given, Eagles don't have a super hard schedule the rest of the season. They face a lot of, they get the Giants in there. They get the Washington football team in there. I think that this is the risk that I would be willing to take given the limited assets that I think you'd have to give up to get him.
All right. Any other thoughts there, Evan? Is that a guy on your radar at all, Miles Sanders? Or you?
I mean, if they are going to run the ball with their backs, 17 times, with Jordan Howard saw, and Miles Sanders can get the ball 17 times, please, by all means.
66 running back rushing attempts the last 2 weeks. That's not even counting Jalen Hurts. It's a crazy volume for the past 2 weeks.
In weeks 3 and 4, Miles Sanders only saw 9 rushing attempts total.
Yeah. He's averaged less than 10 rushing attempts a game this year. But it's just. But if you go back to when the offense was most successful, which was those first 3 starts for Jalen Hurts, they were running as much as they were throwing.
His first game of the year was good, so yeah.
And it sets up those deep passes that we saw to Devontae Smith this year.
He's by far the most talented back on this roster. We know that. So why it took Miles Sanders to get injured for them to realize, hey, we need to run the ball, I don't know. But
Listen,
to your point,
absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Right. Yeah. To your guys' point, he has he's hurt right now. His value is super low. Go ahead and buy him because obviously they figured out that, hey, running the ball works. So when Miles Sanders comes back and he's going to see volume, he's the most talented back on the roster, like I said. If he's going to see that type of volume, then you got a freaking steal. So yeah, buy low on Miles Sanders.
Yeah.
For sure. Let's move on to number 3. This is mine. This is the third topic of the week. A guy that you might have trouble buying, but I would buy him if I could, particularly in Dynasty. The Muth, Pat Freiermuth. We all love him. I think everybody loves him right now. This guy's
What's not
rookie.
to love?
I mean, he's got a great nickname, the Muth. And he's been a monster, particularly in the red zone for the Steelers the last couple of weeks, and really has been on a climb really since the start of the year. I mean, if you just look at his trend in terms of, fantasy points, but also snap share and target share, he has been on a climb since basically week 6. So week 6, 8, and 9, which kind of coincides with the Juju injury, and also Eric Ebron, who hasn't played in a couple of games. He's had basically 18% target share or higher. He's also been playing pretty much. He had 60% of the snap share in week 6, but now he's jumped up to in the 70s, close to even 80%. So he's out there all the time, and now he's scoring points for you, 12 or more points the last 3 weeks he's played. And like I said, red zone, he's basically had 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. And in the red zone, they're looking for him too. So you could see he's getting open in that area, and they need that, particularly now with the Chase Claypool injury. So you might have some guys coming back this week. Eric Ebron's practicing again. Juju's not coming back. He wasn't necessarily a red zone monster anyways, but Claypool, big target. Now he could be missing multiple games potentially. I don't see this, potential production of this tight end really going anywhere. I think this is a guy that you could probably plug in and play, especially at that position, which we've discussed numerous times. That's a position, once you get past a few guys, it's wide open. And this is a guy who's been playing as a tight end 1 for these past few weeks, and honestly could find himself finding his way into the top 12 overall soon if he continues this production. So this is a guy I like because he's getting targets. That offense needs a guy like that, honestly. Big Ben, he's not going to be chucking it down the field, and tight ends fit that role close up, and particularly in the red zone. So I love Pat Freiermuth. I think that's a guy in Dynasty. If you could still go get him, I would be fine paying a price, particularly in a rebuild scenario where you're out of it and you could trade a Zach Ertz or something like that, maybe a more established guy, particularly name-wise. Maybe someone missed the hype of Freiermuth a little bit. If you can get him on your team, I would do that for sure. And I particularly like him this week playing Detroit. I have no problem slotting Freiermuth in your lineup. Imagine you guys are with me here, but I'll throw it around here. Thoughts on the Freiermuth? Evan, we could start with you and throw it to you, Josh, for any other thoughts on Freiermuth and maybe what you'd look to trade for him if you were in a scenario in Dynasty.
I've liked him from the beginning of the year. It was just I knew Eric Ebron was going to, kind of hamper his availability, his snap percentage and so forth, until he got the opportunity, and he shows the Steelers why they should have never spent money on Eric Ebron in the first place. That was the biggest waste of money. But I don't think there's going to be an Eric Ebron anymore. Not the way that this kid's playing. I freaking love Pat Freiermuth. Ben Roethlisberger obviously has found a connection with him, and now that we have Juju Smith-Schuster out, we have Claypool out. Claypool's already been ruled out for week 10. He's probably going to miss multiple weeks. Freiermuth is going to be, a target that Ben looks to early and often when he's not going Deontay Johnson's way. So yeah, love Freiermuth in all formats, especially in Dynasty. And I mean, this is a guy that you could have got off the waiver wire not too long ago. It's crazy how fast things happen. So that's why you always need to be looking ahead. and grabbing, guys off the waiver wire that potentially could, step into a role. And we'll kind of allude to that later because the trade deadline's coming up. We got to start kind of looking ahead and snagging guys that could have a big workload moving forward. But yeah, Pat Freiermuth, I'm all in all formats.
Yeah, I mean, Jay, you know how I feel about Pat
Oh,
Freiermuth.
yes.
I've been beating the Pat Freiermuth.
You were on him first, yeah.
Since pre-draft and our tape analysis process. I just watched this guy, and you see a skill set that translates to the NFL. A guy who is a large human being who can be an inline blocker, can also split out to the slot, or run on the flank, and has the kind of route running and athleticism that is rare for his size. Now, he's not a Kyle Pitts type athlete running a 4.42, but he's a guy who's running a 4.6 something. He's a guy who can change direction on a dime, which was evident when he separated late, kind of on a semi-broken play when he scored the touchdown this past weekend. In the end zone, he separated late as Ben rolled out of the pocket when he was going through his reads there, got open and caught a touchdown. And that's the sort of thing you want to see from your tight ends. Like, he's a guy who's getting a large target share, and he's a guy who has a nose for touchdowns. He's got great hands. He separates in a phone booth. And I don't know what else you could ask for. And particularly given we don't see tight ends produce year one.
Not as a
Rarely
rookie.
Not as a rookie. We've hardly ever seen. Obviously, Kyle Pitts has been good this year.
That's a great call.
I mean, Rob Gronkowski had a pretty good rookie year. Pat Freiermuth right away has looked good. Carved out a role where there wasn't necessarily a role for him to have at the beginning of the year, and like, I think the ceiling for this guy is a multi-year top 5 option at the tight end position. I think he's that good, particularly in this offense where they use the tight end
he's
really well.
More traditional tight end too, because he's blocking tight end. He could do the other things too. So
he might be their best blocker.
You guys are more of the dynasty experts per se. I'm not. This is my first year in dynasty. But looking forward, obviously Big Ben's on a decline. Does it matter what the outlook on the Steelers quarterback situation look like for Freiermuth's dynasty value?
If it wasn't for the sake that Ben Roethlisberger has looked pretty bad, I would say yes, but I don't think I think the floor is pretty low already. So I feel like my hope is like, I like a guy like Pickett in this year's draft to go. He's a kind of a Ben Roethlisberger-esque talent or prospect in his skill set that I'd be fine with. I'd also love to see them sign Jimmy Garoppolo in the offseason because I think this is a roster that could compete with serviceable quarterback play and maybe a couple other pieces on the O-line in particular in the draft. So like, I think this offense is set up with, especially with Mike Tomlin and Matt Canada, who I think has done a really good job as an offensive coordinator, to have a fairly seamless transition and put a guy in a Mac Jones type situation. You know what I mean? Where take what's given to you, don't ask too much of the quarterback, let your playmakers, Najee, Deontay.
That can help the tight end too, because tight ends tend to present safe targets for young quarterbacks.
Security blanket for young quarterbacks.
So I worry more about the other wide receivers a little bit more, even though like Claypool could benefit from a guy who could throw down the field maybe more, but like that's a conversation for another day though, how Big Ben's exit would affect those guys. But I think Muth would be safe regardless, and that's such a nice stable system, like coaching wise. It's a system where you don't have to worry as much because they have such a good infrastructure in place, which is good. But let's get going with number 4 here. Let's start to you, Evan. What do you got here at the 4th topic of the week?
So I started with a buy low per se, just a guy basically that I'm buying. Now I'm going to go with this is a sell high candidate in my eyes, and that's James Conner. I get it. He has 11 touchdowns, an unreal just touchdown rate, 11 touchdowns a year, leads the league. But that's actually one of the reasons I'm selling. I mean, take advantage of that unreal touchdown success. And now with Chase Edmonds out, people are buying him at RB1 prices. I get it. The running back landscape is rough. I mean, it is rough out there. So I'm not saying he's a must sell, obviously, by any means, because a lot of fantasy managers may be in the position where, they need to hold Connor. And I get it, but I would be, personally, I would be looking to see sell Connor coming off of that 40-point performance, because I don't think his value is ever going to be higher than what it is right now. Coming off the 40-point performance with Chase Edmonds now hurt, he's going to see the full workload. So yeah, personally, I'm pulling the trigger because, like I said, especially with the Edmonds injury and Connor about to take over the Arizona backfield basically by himself, with Benjamin kind of, coming in behind him, but it's basically going to be Connor's backfield. So yeah, my last point is Edmonds looks to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain. Honestly, I'm not sold that Connor can hold up to taking on a full workload for basically the rest of the season. I mean, so if you are, by all means, like I said, hold on to Connor, because if he stays healthy, given that workload, he's going to give you RB1 production. But personally, I'm selling high. I'm selling high on that 40-point game performance. And I'm going to get a nice return for Connor because I think before he gets banged up, we've seen that in recent years when he's been asked to take on a full workload. And yeah, so I am definitely selling Connor. And just quickly, a running back I'm also looking to buy before the deadline is Aaron Jones, coming off that dud performance against the Chiefs when he was expected to, have a monster game with no Rodgers. So yeah, one I'm selling and one I'm buying, but Connor is my main point here. Just selling off of that big performance.
Yeah, Aaron Jones always kind of a buy. Connor's definitely interesting. The question with it is always who are you selling him for? That's always kind of, particularly in redraft, like who could you actually get is always a question with these guys. And then, is that actually going to produce better than, the guy that you're selling? I'll throw out a couple names. Maybe that might be fun for a second here with James Conner. I'm looking at rest of season rankings on Fantasy Pros just to get a sense of guys around the area, and that seemed like they could be fair a little bit at the same position. Like, how about Elijah Mitchell, for example? This is a guy where you might be able to do that. Would you rather have Elijah Mitchell the rest of the year or James Conner? Throw it to you, Evan, first, then Josh.
I think I want Elijah Mitchell. I think game script last time, because I'm going to talk about Mitchell too. I mean, game script kind of warranted him only getting, I think it was 8 touches. But I think moving forward, he's going to be the guy. I mean,
caught passes, which was nice.
Yeah,
and for Mitchell too. So
caught passes. I just, like I said, my main thing with Connor is I don't know that he's going to be able to hold up, because we've seen it over even a full workload.
Yeah,
he has to be able to hold up.
I don't know if they'll let him have it. I think he's going to catch more passes though,
because I think
what they were doing last game.
Edmonds was keeping him upright. It was a glorious role. Hey, we get down to the goal line, I get to score touchdowns. But now I think he's going to be asked to do more, and I just don't know that he's going to be able to hold up. So yeah, I think I still like Elijah Mitchell better.
What'd you take there, Josh? Mitchell or Connor?
Yeah, I think I'm very slightly on Connor there. Because Mitchell's been banged up too. It just feels, I guess, like the 1-for-1 trades, I feel like I'd be more interested in something cross position. Just thinking of like,
I'm usually into that too.
Real world situation for James Conner. He probably wasn't drafted as your RB1. He probably wasn't drafted as your RB2. And if he was drafted as one of those, you probably screwed up already in this tons of players. So hopefully he's kind of expendable on your roster. Hopefully maybe he's in a nice position. Obviously injuries have happened throughout. So like, would you trade for like Robert Woods plus Like, I feel like that's in the realm of possibilities for James Conner, getting a wide receiver who's got a little bit of a maybe
you
a
buying
buy
low
window.
now with the OBJ news? Like, I know
Yeah,
you're
that's
buying
what I
low on
was thinking. A guy like Robert Woods, who I think in PPR has been averaging like 15, 16 points a game. Like, he's been more
Yeah.
productive. I think he's there, and I think you could add on like another useful piece, like at tight end. Like, I think you could sell like James Conner
Get
for
the
like
Muth there too.
Robert Woods in the move. Honestly, I mean, maybe
Maybe.
not now because I think people
No,
are going
I
to be
would
super
definitely do
high on
that.
fire move.
Yeah.
But like even like a tight end like Dawson Knox, who's supposed to be coming back from
Sure,
injury,
yeah.
who's been out for a little while, something like that, like a serviceable piece at tight end who might be a slight upgrade for you, and a wide receiver who I think is going to give you just as much, if not more than James Conner, particularly with what Evan was talking about with his just inability to stay on the field the past few years.
Yeah, I think the cross positional makes the most, because that always makes sense. If
Yeah,
he is an expendable running back on your team, for
I
sure,
think you could do it for
see
like
what you
a
can get. Yeah.
Mike Williams, coming down. He's kind of come down to earth.
Yeah.
I think people would be willing to do that. Maybe Amari Cooper and another piece. Honestly, I've seen that where you could get Amari Cooper and maybe like a Javonte Williams or something.
Yeah.
I would do that all day. Because
Oh,
Javonte
yeah,
is a
in a
great
heartbeat.
buy just because if Gordon just misses some games, Javonte Williams will win you your championship.
And I think you could pull
like that's
you
what can
honestly,
happen.
Yeah.
with the Edmonds injury, I think you could honestly pull that trade off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not bad. I mean, it's certainly explorable because I actually don't mind. I don't even mind Connor as a buy too. He's kind of weird because, like, I think like if you're desperate at running back,
Right.
particularly in Dynasty where I tend
yeah.
to play more of those. It's so hard sometimes. Guys get loaded up with running backs, so scarcity can even be at a higher degree there. So he's totally not a bad gamble buy, but he's also makes a lot of sense as a sell. So he's like one of those guys where there's a good market for Connor.
Yeah, it depends on what you need for sure. That's why I said he's not by any means like you have to sell him, because obviously it depends on what your outlook looks like. But either way, whether or not he's expendable on your roster or you need a running back, you go after him.
Yeah, let's stick with the same team here, Josh. Let's get to number 5 here. And what's your topic here?
Yeah, and this might actually add some fodder to the sell James Conner here. I'm a little worried about Kyler Murray down the stretch here. It's not that he's not an elite talent when he's there, but I'm worried that we're getting a repeat of last season. So he missed this past week with an ankle injury. We all know last season he was not there in the fantasy championships for you with that shoulder injury, let alone how ineffective he was the games leading up to his absences as well. And, a lot has been made of his relative frame and size and being able to take the kind of punishment he takes when he gets outside of the pocket, or with the hits that he takes. I don't super ascribe, because I don't think there's a lot of correlation actually between relative size and injury, but there is a correlation between the amount of hits you take as a runner to injury. And it's why we always have these conversations with mobile quarterbacks. Is we want them to slide, we want them to make business decisions, we want them to get out of bounds, because we see the attrition that happens with running backs. And over the past 2 years, we've seen that with Kyler Murray. He hasn't held up for the whole season. So basically the cheat that I'm trying to tell you going into 1R trade deadline and into rest of the season is have a backup plan for Kyler Murray if you're riding him throughout the rest of the season. In 1 QB formats especially, you might be shit out of luck in 2 QB and super flex formats, unless you can grab Colt McCoy, which I think he is the only thing you can do there. But in 1 QB formats, grab a solid backup. Grab a guy off waivers. Trade a little something if you can to get a guy who's going to be serviceable, like
Cousins,
Burrow
maybe.
Burrow probably is out of that realm now, although he's had some bad weeks, but someone in that upper QB2 territory, someone who's not going to be a Sam Darnold or a
Cam Newton.
some of those
Go get Cam Newton.
I would take a flyer on Cam
Not
Newton.
bad. You should be picking him up if you have Kyler Murray.
You should be picking him up because even last year I think he was QB 16 in an abysmal year last year because he has such rushing upside as well. But yeah, like I mean, there's a guy I'll talk about in a little bit who would also fit that bill as well, but I won't spoil that for later. So, what are you guys' thoughts on Kyler Murray rest of season?
I'll throw it to Evan quick, but just I agree on all that. Kyler just doesn't. Something seems to be up with his durability. He's fantastic. Once he starts to get nicked up his shoulder last year, just things start to decline a little bit. So a little worried there. Still great. It's just definitely a little concerning. But what do you think, Evan?
Yeah, I hope they give him with their record. Hopefully they kind of take the cautious approach with him and let him and take the the long-term approach with him and let him get healthy. They don't rush him back because I mean, like you guys have said, last season we saw when he got beat up, he just wasn't right. This year, same thing. And maybe going forward, does his stature kind of play a role in that? How long is Murray going to be able to hold up? I don't know if we're at that point yet to where we need to have that conversation, but we've seen it. And this is now, the second time we've seen when he gets banged up that he's just not the same quarterback. So as far as fantasy purposes go, by all means, I don't think it's a bad idea to have a plan in place. Like you should always have a plan in place for sure. And then, with Murray going down, we saw him sit out, last week. They got to win anyway, which is, great because like I said, now maybe they can take a little more cautious approach with him. And he can get back healthy, not only for his sake and the Cardinals' sake, but for our fantasy roster's sake as well.
That's right, for sure. I'm going to get going with number 6 here. This is my topic here. Backup wide receivers in Tampa. Gonna have to look into these guys a little bit heading into this week. We've got Antonio Brown already ruled out. Gronk was also ruled out. That's at the tight end position, but we're getting to the depths of this wide receiver core. And to add to that, Chris Godwin, questionable. Game time decision, which I hate. I have Godwin all over the place in fantasy, so I will be checking, scouring lineups, multiple lineups on Sunday if he's out and trying to find replacements. That will not be fun. I hope he plays. But if he was to miss time, and even not, you could kind of look to down the depth chart here a little bit to find some guys to plug in if you're desperate. And the guy that jumps out to me is Tyler Johnson, just from the guy who's been on the field lately and is getting a little bit of an increased snap share. A guy who's out there a little bit more, had his best week of the season last time they played, which was 2 weeks ago. They had a bye last week. But if we look at his snap share, last 2 games, over 65%. Right around there, last 2 games for Tyler Johnson. This was a guy also that was rookie last year and a guy a lot of people liked, kind of a weird guy to kind of get a feel for. He's a really solid professional receiver. He just hasn't had a ton of playing time. A little inconsistent at times. He will make really kind of flashy hands catches, but then he will also have some weird drops in spots. But a guy who has potential is just kind of hard to peg, but he's going to have a little bit more of an increased role here, particularly if Chris Godwin's out this week or any other weeks, where really it's only Mike Evans, and then we'll see if some other guys get in the mix, like Scotty Miller potentially coming back. They also signed Brashad Perryman. So some other guys could get in the mix there.
Last time we saw Brashad Perriman in a Tampa Bay Buccaneers jersey, he was lighting it up.
That's when he resurrected his career. Yeah, that it was like that 4-game stretch at the end of the year a couple of years ago, where all of a sudden he was back, and look where that got him contracts on just like 2 other teams.
I hope my boy out of North Texas, Jalen Darden gets a chance.
Yeah, I was good. That's the other guy in the mix. I think he's probably
he is some sort of athlete.
The next guy to come up. You never know. This is a guy where any of these guys are a crazy dart throw.
Bolitnikoff Award finalist Jalen Darden out of North Texas.
I love Dart. I have him stashed in multiple dynasty leagues. He's the wild dart throw. Like if you're real desperate, because he hasn't played. Like Tyler Johnson last week, actually, 5 for 6, 65 yards in week 8 out there playing. But honestly, anybody who gets on the field there, Tom Brady spreads the ball out so much that you really don't know who could get involved. So if Darden gets some playing time, wouldn't be shocked if he sees a good game. You just never know. So he's not bad. Scotty Miller is always kind of the spoiler in this. It's like the other guys are flashier. You're like, yeah, I want to play like, Darden. And then Scotty Miller will catch like a 51-yard touchdown.
Brady likes his little, receivers like that too. Yeah.
He's the one who'll get. But who you look at any of these guys jumping in any like DFS lineups in this? Any interest there, particularly if Godwin's out?
Dude, if Godwin is out, I will definitely take a shot on a $3,300 Tyler Johnson. Absolutely.
He's 33 this week. Yeah,
3,300 on DraftKings. And like you said, Brady will spread the ball around. He's most likely going to be looking Mike Evans' way in the end zone. But if Mike Evans is covered, he's going to find the open receiver. Brady's playing lights out. So if we don't get Scotty Miller back, we don't get Chris Godwin back, and it's just Mike Evans and the rest of the crew, Tyler Johnson is going to be in a lot of my lineups at 3,300 just because of the quarterback he's attached to.
They also could not have a better matchup against the Washington.
Oh yeah, that's
true. So true.
It's just an absolute. To quote Mike, dumpster fire at in the secondary in particular. Any love for OJ Howard this week, possibly getting some more run?
It's not. I mean, not bad. Not a bad play. He had that 1 week.
Yeah, that 1 week, and I had no choice. I had to play him in a deep Devy league. So I ended up playing OJ Howard that week, and that's the last sighting of OJ Howard we've seen so far.
Honestly, anybody's a decent dart throw.
That was gonna be my point
in that offense. If once you see who's active, you can make a decision off of that.
And he's gonna be probably OJ Howard. I would suspect is the min on
3,000 on.
He's 2,700 or something.
He's sub 3. Oh, he's in that range of. He's like Jordan Akins. That's
so he takes one. It takes one catch and a touchdown, and he pays that salary off. So.
Oh yeah. So so pay attention. Who's active? Who's not active this weekend, and kind of scour that depth chart. And we've highlighted some guys who could hit there in your lineup on Tampa Bay, and a great matchup. Let's get to number 7. Evan, what do you got here?
All right, so before we get to our cheats of the week, this will be my last one. I'm going to go back to another sell. And speaking of the Tampa Bay matchup, and they going against the Washington football team, I'm going to be selling McLaurin before the fantasy trade deadline, if I can. And I'm going to look to get, a receiver in the same tier, but gives me less volatility, because when I go to make a playoff run, I would rather have a receiver I know I can count on for a solid floor compared to McLaurin, who is possibly, been one of the most volatile fantasy wide receivers this year. It's not his fault. It's just the quarterback that he's attached to, and Taylor Heineke, who's just like a YOLO ball quarterback who just doesn't care. He will throw it up, and hopefully McLaurin comes down with it. Weekly overall, McLaurin has been a top 5 receiver 3 times this season. This is PPR, but he's also finished as the wide receiver 44 or worst 5 times. I mean, that's just all over the place, and too all over the place for my liking. It just speaks to how volatile he's been this year because he has Taylor Heineke throwing the ball. He does, and this week he does get to face an easily exploitable Tampa Bay secondary. Plus we probably suspect that the WFT offense is, most likely going to have to go pass heavy. I think it's possible we get top 5 McLaurin this week in week 10. But I think that would be the perfect time to move on from him, so he doesn't give you another wide receiver 44 or worse McLaurin during the fantasy playoffs. I'm selling McLaurin if I can. And then kind of to keep things uniformed here, I'll give you another player I'm looking to buy, which I alluded to him earlier, which is Elijah Mitchell. After game script, like I said last week, only allowed him to get 8 carries against the Cardinals. He has a favorable matchups coming up after he faces the Rams in week 10. He gets to face defenses like the Jaguars, the Seahawks, the Bengals, the Falcons, the Texans. So yeah, buy you some Eli Mitchell, folks.
I love that. I love Elijah Mitchell rest of the year. McLaurin, I just quick, I put him in my tier of what I called the Tyler Lockett Award this week, boomer bust guys. Other nominees were, the guy I gave it to is Cortland Sutton, also really boomer bust this year, but also McLaurin, really, also Tyler Lockett, and then also Mike Williams falls right in there. We'll talk about him a little bit more in a second. Josh, any thoughts there? And then take it away with your next topic, with your last thoughts on McLaurin here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say I just love McLaurin as a player. He's just been so hampered by bad quarterback play, bad play calling, all of the bad that could happen around him. Reminds me a little bit of like DeAndre Hopkins early in his career, where he just had really bad situations. DeAndre Hopkins came out a little rosier at that time, but at some point you got to get this guy a quarterback, and then I think like sky's the limit for him. But let's go into my final cheat before the cheat of the week, and my cheat is start Matt Ryan this weekend in 2 quarterback formats. I think he's a great play. I think he's a perfect streaming option in 1 quarterback formats if you have a really tough matchup for one of your top guys, or your starters, Joe Burrow, who's out this week. I'm starting
Kyler,
Matt
if he misses the game.
Kyler if he misses the game again. I think he's been quietly really good for the last 5 games or so. He's averaged 20 points a game since week 4, and he gets to face the Cowboys this week, who have allowed the 8th most passing yards to opposing offenses at 270 a game. Just got carved up by Teddy Two Gloves and that vaunted Denver offense. And he's also had at least 2 touchdowns every game except for week 1 and week 8 this year. So I think he provides a high floor provided he can take care of the ball. So keep it away from Trayvon Diggs in this game. And I think you're going to get another solid performance out of Matt Ryan, who is somehow cutting that team into playoff contention. And they're rounding into form. Cordarrelle Patterson's been a reliable playmaker. I love Kyle Pitts. Some of the catches that Kyle Pitts makes, just, it makes a quarterback's job easy with some of the catches he makes, and then randomly drops some, but that's a conversation for another day. So I like Matt Ryan rest of season. I think he is he's right now QB 15 in standard scoring formats. And I think he is a guy you can buy low, or if you have him on your roster, lock and load with Matt Ryan the rest of the season. I think he's going to be a solid floor quarterback too for you.
Yeah, for sure. That's a solid matchup this week against Evan's Dallas Cowboys. Well, what do you think of that matchup, Evan? You worried about Matt Ryan coming in?
I mean,
wherever
if,
they're playing,
like you said, look what Teddy Two Gloves just did. Matt Ryan should have no problem. I mean, we saw in week 2 last year, Ryan had 273 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Cowboys. He's been rolling as of late, 300 plus yards, multiple touchdown passes in 3 of his last 4 games. So I don't know, Matt, like you said, like Josh said, Matt Ryan somehow has his team in playoff contention. Matt Ryan's rolling right now. I think he's just outside of QB1 range. Somehow I thought when we saw my goodness, Calvin Ridley, his name was slipping my mind. When we saw Calvin Ridley go out, that, maybe it would be a struggle for Matt Ryan, but he's keeping it going, man. And like I said, I think he's just outside of QB1 range. And absolutely, if you have him in Superflex, you are sitting pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will, and this is just more of a point on the Cowboys defense, because obviously you watch them a little closer than most of us. I get the impression that the Dallas defense has certainly improved from last season, but they were punching above their weight for the beginning half of the season, and they're kind of regressing to where they really are.
I actually talked about that a couple weeks ago when I was taking the Vikings before
you
I knew
did,
Cooper Rush was going to play. I told these guys, I said, look, man, we're getting a lot of turnovers, but if you take those turnovers away and you really peel back the layers, while we are leaps and bounds better than we were last year, our defense really still is not good. And when those turnovers dry up, we're going to start getting exposed for who we really are. And unfortunately, I think it's starting to happen. Then we just get hit with the Randy Gregory news. So, this Cowboys offense is going to have to carry them week in and week out because their defense isn't going to do it without this offense being an explosive offense.
No, and they should be able to their credit, with the great running game and with the weapons that Dak has, as long as they hopefully recover from what is probably a blip from last week.
Well, that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, it could be a Dallas fantasy players leading you down the stretch in the playoffs, particularly if they have to score like they
I
did
would
last
love to
year.
see more of that, because we've talked about this on the Brothers of Dynasty.
Defense
I was like,
reverting to the mean.
I was like, I want the old Dallas air it out offense.
We have to win 40-36. Let's go.
Yeah, give me that CD, Omari.
They just need the ball. They didn't have the ball last week at all. Didn't have the ball.
No.
They couldn't stop the run, so they gotta let the team score quicker so they could
shoot out with the Falcons. I'm just hoping big Kyle Pitts game, big Matt Ryan game, big CeeDee Lamb game. Just score some points, because I need to see some points after this past week and a half of football.
Yeah, for sure. It would be nice if we have some offensive performances instead of what we've been seeing 9-6. Bills, Jacksonville games, whatever the garbage was last night.
Literally the worst game I've ever seen in my life.
Let's string some drives together this weekend, guys. Score some points. Let's go. And maybe the Chargers can do it. For my topic before we get to the cheat of the week, you trust Mike Williams the rest of the season? We loved him at the beginning of the year, but man, what happened to Mike Williams that we once knew? 4 out of the last 5 games, he's had basically 13% target share or less. He snuck in a big 36% week there where he had 36 fantasy points. But other than that, those weeks there with that target share, 2 fantasy points, 4.7, 3.9, 7.8. Just pretty much a disaster. A guy that's hurting you when you start him in those weeks, and a guy that was kind of a must start going into those because he was so good at the beginning of the year. He was hitting plays down the field. He was getting tons of target share along with Keenan Allen. We all know what Keenan Allen's going to get, but he started to establish himself as almost more of the better fantasy option. That was all of a sudden everything kind of changed. Do we trust Mike Williams? Can he rebound this week? Because I'm looking at this matchup this week, and I think it's actually kind of a prime week for him to potentially bounce back versus Minnesota. Not great versus wide receivers. This is a team that you can score against. Mike Williams is out there. He had that injury, little hiccup that we thought could have been affecting him, but he's been out there playing, so it's really not the injury. It's just things just haven't totally clicked. I would go back to that well this week. I actually do think this is a game where he can flip it, and I think this is a game where they could score against that defense in Minnesota. Also, a little Keenan Allen's questionable. I think that's more of just a questionable tag. It sounds like he's going to play, but if there's any kind of injury concerns there that could limit him in any way, that's could benefit Mike Williams. But I think I would be willing to go back to that. But I'm probably shaken enough where I don't know if he's just an automatic start the rest of the way. It would depend on your roster construction. I think I'm most likely playing Mike Williams, but if you have a stacked wide receiver core, he's kind of fallen back into where you got to think about it a little bit more rest of the season, just because he has been volatile, especially lately. What do you guys think there? Do you trust Mike Williams this week? And then what do you think about him rest of season? Josh, will start with you and you can throw it to Evan.
Yeah, I think this is the reality of the what you get as a Mike Williams manager who rosters Mike Williams is a boom or bust player, right? Like that's been his MO throughout his career, and he was very consistent to begin with, but he's kind of reverted to the mean. I will say there were some unfortunate matchups where the offense on the whole really was not good against the Patriots and against the Ravens, notably. Good secondaries on both of those teams. I think he saw a lot of J.C. Jackson. He saw a lot of Marlon Humphrey. And this past week, I think he saw a decent amount of Darius Slay. So he's gotten some rough matchups the past few weeks. But the guys that are supposed to be those wide receiver ones that he was at the beginning of the year win more, like at least a good amount of the time when they're up against tough matchups. They find a way to win. That's not really what Mike Williams is. He's more really a kind of a bull. He's Tyler Lockett, as you said, is kind of a good comp for him. He's gonna have his games. I like with a beat up secondary in Minnesota that wasn't very good to begin with. I do like him this week, and I feel like to an extent, if you have the luxury to bench him, then good for your roster going forward. But I think you're kind of committed to playing him because you can't necessarily pick which weeks those are going to be. And when he hits, he hits. Like he's gonna win you some weeks. So like I'd rather try to find safety other places on my roster to raise my floor and roll with Mike Williams because like I trust that offense. I trust that Joe Lombardi's system, and I think there's going to be. I think for the rest of the way, there's going to be more hits than misses.
What about you, Evan? You fine riding with Mike Williams rest of the way this weekend?
I actually do love Mike Williams. I actually ended up trading him for Najee Harris. I traded away Mike Williams and Kirk Cousins for Najee Harris.
And Kirk Cousins for Najee Harris. Okay, I thought it was
one
straight
QB
up,
or two QB.
No, this is super flex. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it makes a little more sense.
Yeah.
And to the guy's point, he had Justin Herbert as his first quarterback anyway, so he was looking to get that stack going. So I'm loving the fact that Mike Williams is kind of, went on a downslope here. But I think it's kind of to our Miles Sanders point in the whole, the running game working. I think in this Joe Lombardi offense, you saw when he was targeting Mike Williams and he was getting him the ball, things were looking good. When we're seeing Mike Williams only get 5 targets or less in games, it's just not, it hasn't looked as the same crisp offense. So I think we kind of see him get back to kind of that play calling and targeting Mike Williams downfield because he's such a threat. You just have to get him more than 5 targets, I feel like. So I think we do see things turn around. And against this Vikings, secondary is a prime matchup to do it against.
For sure. Let's get to the cheat of the week. This is our 10th topic. We'll do a quick last cheat for the week to wrap things up for week 10. Let's kick it off with you, Evan, with the cheat of the week.
All right, so this is going to be my underdog pick of the week. We finally took a loss on the underdog pick last week, which was the San Francisco 49ers, who I was taking them when I thought Kyler Murray was going to play.
Oh, yeah.
So how the hell they couldn't cover against the freaking...
At least you got it on, like, the good value.
Against the Colt McCoy-led offense, who were down their top pass catcher. Chase Edmonds goes down on the first offensive play. I don't know. Anyway. Last week all around was freaking nuts. Cowboys losing. The Saints lost to the Falcons. Probably the most surprising of them all was the Bills, who couldn't score more than 6 points against the Jaguars.
Weren't teams up until like the 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, weren't teams that had 7 points or more like 27-0 against the spread?
Dude,
that point, and now it's been obliterated.
It's just and we see, there's always a time where the market's going to change, but to change like on a dime like that to where you see all of the top tier teams just go down, it is nuts. But yeah, that's why I've said though, against the spread, especially, man, these underdogs are freaking hitting at a high rate. So don't be afraid to take your shots on these underdogs. We saw another one hit last night. So yeah, take your shots on some of these underdogs. Anyway, on to my underdog pick of this week, which is going to be the Cleveland Browns, who are road underdogs at +2 against the New England Patriots. Road dogs are 51-30-1 against the spread this year. That's a lovely 63% of the time. And get this, if you never watched a minute of football this year, you blindly bet on every road team so far this season, you would only have had a losing record in one of the 9 weeks, which was week 7. It's just insane. You could be sitting pretty right now off of blindly betting against the spread on underdogs, road underdogs. But yeah, by all means, take the Browns on the spread, but I'm actually going to be taking them on the money line as well at plus 105, even with the Nick Chubb news, because they still have my boy Dearness Johnson, who rushed for 146 yards and a touchdown last time he got to start. The Pats have both of their running backs banged up. They're both questionable to play. And while they're coming off 3 straight wins, they are 4-0 on the road. They go figure. 4-0 on the road. We're talking about road teams, right? But yeah, they go back to home this Sunday where they are 1-4. So yeah, the Browns, I feel like they also have something to prove with the whole OBJ drama. They proved that last week. And then you add in the Pats struggles at home with possibly losing both of their starting running backs. And I think the Browns win their second game in a row.
Well, we're both Pats fans, so we like the Pats big. So.
No, bolt up, baby. Go Chargers.
Oh yeah, I forgot you flipped for the Chargers. I'll give it a little bit of thought. I'll get mine out of the way since we're over the hour here. DPJ is my cheat, just to throw in. We're talking about the Browns. He could be a key to them this week. I just want to give my stat on him for his downfield targets. Is my funnest thing. This is Donovan Peoples-Jones. The Peoples-Jones. For everybody out there, if you don't know who
for
DPJ
the people.
is. Yeah, he's for the people, by the people. 20 for targets, 20 plus yards. He's had 5 recently, 4 receptions for 164 yards and 2 touchdowns. This guy's a monster down the field. A lot of this has happened lately. And this is a guy whose role could increase with like OBJ out. He's a downfield threat. He's sort of in the mold of like what Deshaun Jackson used to do, or only takes like 3 targets necessarily, but you might get 250-yard completions, potentially a touchdown there. So it's a guy who he's a gamble to play a little bit just because that target share might be low in, when you're setting lineups. If you have any best ball leagues out there, he's pretty fantastic for that because it only takes one from the Peoples-Jones and he could score a 60-yard touchdown and really, really be good for your fantasy team. So I don't know if Bill Belichick lets him do that this week. We'll see what, Bill Belichick always shuts something down on another team. Maybe it's that.
It's the Peoples-Jones that he gets the
maybe that's what he's worried
treatment.
about. I don't know. You want to get, give up a 60-yard touchdown out of nowhere. But our cornerbacks are, Mills, I don't trust some of them. I mean, Jackson had a good play last week. They are, but there's
Jackson's
some weak
legit.
links there.
Jackson's legit.
Yeah,
Mills
he's good. Mills been better. He was terrible on the Eagles, so
he was
trust
terrible.
him necessarily.
I don't know what's happened. No idea.
But we'll see. We'll see if they can pop a big play for the Peoples-Jones this week. But going forward, I think he's not a bad guy to start if you have to, or have on your bench to play on bye weeks and injuries and things like that going forward. So he could be interesting for your bet this week. If he can catch a touchdown, that could certainly help things out. Josh, any last thoughts there, and get to your cheat of the week here to round things out?
Yeah, I will just say I think the biggest thing the Browns have going for them is their line play, which we've just gelled. The Patriots O-line has just kind of gelled. Will they be able to hold up against that pass rush with Defensive Player of the Year front runner Myles Garrett? And the O-line I think has a better chance at stopping Barmore and Judon, who have been absolute beasts for the Patriots this season, but that O-line for Cleveland has a real shot at slowing them down. And then it really falls on Baker. Can he, not lose it for them? I think that's going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah, he might have to do more this week, so it'll be.
He might have to, and if I had to pick a game, I'm probably picking the Patriots slightly, but I do think it comes down to the trenches.
Yeah, and I certainly get if you get points there, that makes sense for a bet there for sure.
Yeah,
in terms of a road dog, so
should be close.
So what do you got, Josh, for your cheat of the week here?
My cheat of the week, and this is especially going into your trade deadline, get your relevant handcuffs, key on relevant handcuffs as we do now. As we get past bye weeks, you do not need depth like you used to. And if you have a larger roster, you have no excuse but to get these guys who are going to be impact players for you if the people relative to them go down in front of them. They're going to be better than those depth pieces. I'm talking about guys like Alexander Madison, Mark Ingram, Marlon Mack, AJ Dillon, Tony Pollard, Samaje Perine, Khalil Herbert, even a few quarterbacks, I think, ride into that, like even Mitch Trubisky, I will say. If Josh Allen goes down, I think you're not going to have a lot of better options than Trubisky.
Superflex, probably.
In Superflex. Gardner Minshew and Marcus Mariota, I think, also fall into that category of they can stem the bleeding for you a lot more if you're competing right now. So get those guys on your roster if there is a clear valuable handcuff on there, because they're going to be better than any other option you're going to find on the waiver wire or on your bench.
Yeah, and if there's enough roster spots in your league, depending on how shallow or deep it is, particularly if it's deeper, it's a lot easier. Sometimes you have to make some tough choices, but I like handcuffs later in the year. I want this running game to help me win playoff games. Like that's
absolutely.
That's the value of holding on to other handcuffs gets less useful.
Well, I mean, we saw it with like Jeremy McNichols in. There was no clear handcuff.
Well, yeah, he's not a relevant handcuff.
They're not irrelevant, but Alexander Madison
is
the obvious one that we know, where he's a RB1 if Dalvin Cook is out. That's the type of guy I'm talking about, because you're not going to have another RB1 sitting on your bench to fill in for to Dalvin Cook, who it could be missing some time coming up. There's a lot of possibilities with that as well. So yeah, get Alexander Madison, get those guys that can really keep you in championship contention.
Great, and that's a great place to wrap it up here for the fantasy cheat sheet for this week, week 10. Quick round robin Twitter handles where we could find you. Let's start with you, Evan.
As you guys know by now, you can find most of my stuff at Going for Two. But obviously, you can find us every Friday here on the Friday Cheat Sheet. Thanks to Josh for filling in for Mike. It was much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'll also be on the Sunday pregame show at 11 with Eric, Gladys, and Gerson, where we talk, actives, inactives, DFS, just a good time there. And then kind of off of the NFL front, every Saturday and Sunday, if you do play NBA DFS, head over to Fantasy Pros. You can check out my an NBA DFS primer, where I'll be writing that for Saturday and Sunday slates. But other than that, once again to Josh, thanks for filling in, and thanks for another great Friday night, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Where can we find you? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at DFFJChris, and you can also find me every Tuesday night with Jay on the Brothers of Dynasty podcast, and our brother Andrew as well, who you've seen in the chats. So check us out. We go live at 8:30 every night. So subscribe to our YouTube page, Brothers of Dynasty, and check out everything that we're doing.
Yeah, thanks. So nothing much for me to plug there. Hit the Brothers of Dynasty up. You can find me at JAYC_DFF for my Twitter handle. Find me on this show, doing a little bit of writing at Going for Two for some of their weekly content there. And check out all the other podcasts on Going for Two Live once again, which this podcast is a member of. So for Evan, for Josh this week, we'll catch you later, Mike. For missing the show tonight. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy week 10, and hopefully the games get better this week, and we will catch you next week. Later.